to whip your way there. Yes. And we're at it today again, boy. Well, not again, but second part of the Breakfast Lounge this morning on this Tuesday, 25th day of June. This one definitely will go down in the history books of the Breakfast Lounge. Anyhow, it's 8 minutes after the hour. My second guest this morning, I've got two here this morning, and they are actually the representing the part of the coalition, of course. MP Gumbs is joining me here this morning, the PFP leader, and she has a new member that will be officially introduced here on radio today. I'm sure that you are aware that she was introduced on social media, but she is going to be introduced here in the Breakfast Lounge this morning. I'm getting that told. Gotta get it. Let me see if I can get a microphone where I can get a blockage from me getting that feedback on my mic. How you guys, how you girls doing this morning? Welcome.
Morning, Grace. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to be Thank you. And thank you both so much for coming in this morning. Quite a journey it's been, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
we're almost there.
We're still recruiting though.
Yeah. We have always been about growth for the party. Unfortunately, we didn't have as much time as we would have liked before the next election to have that growth reflect in larger ways. But at the end of the day, Duncan and I have always had a really good relationship from when she was in Parliament. And I think that, well, as you know, she can tell her story herself.
Of course.
I think anybody who sees what's happening today would feel compelled to kind of step forward and try to put themselves in the public arena again for better representation for the country.
Yeah. You are how many candidates strong so far? I mean, as a PFP party, because you go through a strict recruitment to get to actually select your candidate.
We have actually maintained our list, so there's been nobody leaving, random resignation letters left and right from our slate. So our original 10 from the January election, and we're adding on now as we go into this now.
Right.
So 11.
Yeah. Before I go to Miss Duncan here, I want to ask you a question. Yesterday was a story that appeared on the front page of the Daily Herald newspaper regarding Minister Plenipotentiary of The Hague, Mr. Patrice Gumbs, who was actually asked to return here to the island. Let me just turn this noise off. I keep forgetting it every time. I'm sorry about that. Let me apologize to you and, of course, to the listeners. You have decided to recall your Minister Plenipotentiary in The Hague.
Yes.
That is without a doubt. It was seen and read yesterday in the paper. Now, to take up actually the position of Minister of Romi. Now, previously during an appearance on this very program, I asked why PFP didn't keep Mr. Gumbs here to serve as the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and Infrastructure until a suitable replacement for Mr. Peterson was found.
Yeah.
Considering his legal challenges. Now, at that time, you also discussed the portfolio being entrusted to URSM. So let's just revisit that moment. So, yeah, I hope I'm going to turn your mics off so you can actually listen to this audio that we actually have here to just, again, like I said, we're going to revisit that moment right now. Okay, so let me just stop the music here in the background a bit, and then we're going to elaborate on this, okay? To Mr. Veronica Janssen-Webster, who serves as the VSA Minister of the URSM. Now, that's raising some questions. What prompted this move?
Well, we, as with Rami, we also hold Deputy Prime Minister. So it was already in my mind to say that the acting, there's the one ministry, the acting Minister of Rami should be the Minister of VSA, because then you have that cohesion between Rami, Prime Minister, VSA, etc. So there is that circle then completed. So that was basically the intention behind that. I would have preferred that we had been able to swear in our minister candidate for Rami, but as you can read in the paper today, there are some questions surrounding what is happening there with that particular national decree for Rayon Pitson.
Now, speculation, while we're on this topic, speculation is also rife that PFP should have postponed Minister of Plenipotentiary Patrice Gumbs going to The Hague, and instead temporarily entrusted him with the Vromi ministry until a suitable candidate was found. How do you respond to this suggestion?
The suggestion was indeed made to me directly as well, and I said, I disagree, because the state of politics right now in the Netherlands is such that you need to put that strong face forward for that representation of there. I did not want, even though I know Patrice is 100% capable of fulfilling any role within government, considering his experience working in the apparatus of government, it's not something that I was willing to do. Because I believe that we need to hit the ground running from the Minister Plenipotentiary's role and put a strong face forward, and also start to embed ourselves in the ever-changing political landscape of the Netherlands right now. They have their own tumultuous things that they're dealing with. So that's really what drove that decision. It was indeed an option for us, but I did not want to leave the seat of the Minister Plenipotentiary open. Indeed, there is a deputy, but I preferred both of them have to go up and put that united front forward at the same time.
Now, with that said, now, why the recall now?
Well, first, I hope that you continue this trend, because I think it's cool to
remind
people, hey, remember when you said this?
Yeah, I've done it also with MP Jacobs. Also.
Yes, I think so basically it boils down to politics. Unfortunately, right after that, we had the fall of this government, and we were preparing to submit our alternate when everything kind of went kaput. I was more confident to send Patrice to the Netherlands and leave him there when I knew that we had a potential to put an alternate person into the role of Minister of Rami. But then you kind of look at the sense of we're in hurricane season. Rami as infrastructure and environment and such is one of the more critical ministries, and you need somebody 100% focused on the ministry while we're in this season. And I mean, I always take the forecasting of, well, it's going to be more active than we've ever seen it very seriously, and the closer we get to the peak, end of August, begin September, I couldn't in good conscience leave the ministry without somebody 100% focused on it. Minister Janssen-Webster has done her best, but at the end of the day, she has another big ministry, which is VSA, and I could not have attention split, whether it was 75, 25, or whatever, when it came to Rami matters. So Patrice is being sworn in today, actually, and then there will be things then running, hitting the ground running with things that are pending in Rami that, as a result of the required split of attention, have not been able to get their due course.
All right.
Yeah.
What about Mr. Peterson now? Because there's word out there actually that Mr. Peterson's appointment actually was rejected again in court of law on Friday.
So essentially what happened is that the Supreme Court issued their opinion on the question asked by them from the Prosecutor General on this matter of Bram in Curacao, the individual who kind of started all of this, trying to become a minister with a conviction without punishment on his record. The Hokarat, the Supreme Court, sorry, has their opinion can have, it should give us some pause in terms of the principles that we try to uphold within the kingdom. However, at the end of the day, they also confirmed that based on Curaçao's national ordinance for the integrity of candidate ministers, indeed, a conviction without punishment should be viewed as just a conviction. But it also confirms that Bram could still be a minister, even now. For future minister candidates in Curaçao, it's a problem. But here, we do not have a screening law. And we can't even just do one ad hoc, as people would like to believe, because if we try to do a screening law, we have to change our entire constitution. Mainly one article in it, which is Article 36, because the constitution, if you take your screening law and you hold it up against the constitution, they already clash. So it's not even a matter of copy and paste. We would have to change our constitution to reflect that we do not want persons with a conviction of whatever level, because again, I firmly believe that not every conviction is a conviction. Imagine you hit somebody and you, well, their car, and you know, property damage and such, you can't be a minister. I think that's a little extreme. You need to look at the ethics and the integrity of the person and the ethics around the conviction.
But it's more than just hitting a car.
Yeah. Well, he shoved somebody and picked somebody up right after on the video.
Right.
And I think, to be honest, if we really want to drill down to where the problem lies with the false charge of assault brought against him by the KPSM. Everybody saw those videos. No officer was touched in the situation that unfolded after the accident, in which he was almost killed by a drunk driver. So I think that when you look at those parameters, in most countries, that would be, well, it was justifiable, which is what the verdict says. And in fact, in the verdict, it is written, had it not been for that false charge, you wouldn't even be here. So I think we also have to think about those factors when we consider it. And at the end of the day, at the time that Peterson's name was submitted, the jurisprudence said that he could be a minister. So what you have is now an appointment that was purposely withheld to delay until a judgment came out. And it might have been that the judgment had gone either way. So I think that should be the focus. You had a non-democratic body interfering in our democratic process. That is really what it boils down to for me. And I would be saying that if it was anybody that had been put forward with such a spurious conviction on their record.
Do you strongly believe then that we should do away with the screening process of ministers, candidate ministers?
Absolutely not. I think the screening needs to be laid out, and we have discussed it. And I can tell you, for all of the chat that they have, the previous administration, the previous coalition did not have no appetite for a screening law in Parliament. Many said that we should be left to decide our own affairs. We are 100% in favor of a screening process, but it has to be fair, it has to be transparent, and it has to be in our hands, not in the hands of somebody who, and again, I know that the Netherlands will never say this, or they will never give an opinion on it, but I'm pretty sure that part of the delay is that we knew, or they knew, up on Harborview, that it was not going to go in their favor.
All right. Now, the Central Committee meeting is scheduled for this morning at 10 o'clock. The topic again is GEBE. How far is Parliament actually where GEBE is concerned? GEBE, of course, they've been having their press briefings and what have you, but Parliament itself, what is the decision-making process right now within Parliament?
Right now, the decision, we don't actually have a decision to make.
Right, okay.
It's strictly in the hands of the supervisory board and the management at GEBE,
Right.
which I have expressed my concerns, and we as a faction have expressed our concerns to the government, to the Prime Minister, about the direction that is taking. I do not necessarily believe that the people that brought us into this mess can take us out of it. I have a little, we have a little bit more of a, not radical per se, but definitely a very corporate approach to this. There are things that I would have done differently, but of course, these are constant discussions happening behind the scenes as well. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the answers are from the Prime Minister in the meeting that we have today.
But seeing that GEBE is a government-owned company, and you being government, I think there is still some power that you have to push.
There is, but from a governance perspective,
right.
That's really not how. A lot of times, I think ministers too kind of go in and think, well, I can just kind of swing. Your say as government comes in who you put in the supervisory boards. That's the bottom line. This is why we asked questions about the 2021 supervisory board that was put in place by the then coalition, because they did not satisfy a majority of the profiles required by GEBE. And I think we had even discussed that when you were still in Parliament, about how you were there were like 5 business people, but there was nobody legal, there was nobody financial, there was nobody really technical to kind of guide what was going on. And then you had the hack, and that board, started resigning and such. But at the end of the day, I think too, you boards have to realize whether you resign or not, you could be held liable for whatever decisions you've made.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The voice you're hearing in the background here this morning is a newly, basically sworn in candidate to the PFP party.
Yes.
She is no stranger to politics. Of course, she's a former member of the National Alliance and also a former member of Parliament, who eventually she actually was a member of Parliament with the National Alliance, and then she decided to become an independent member. Let me say hi, good morning, and welcome.
Good morning, Grace. Thank you.
I can't even refer to you as MP because it's too early to call, right?
Yeah, definitely too early. It feels good to be here, and good morning to everyone listening. Grace, first let me start up, and I'm going to be very honest and open during this interview.
This is your first.
Yes, actually.
Thank you.
Here I am, yes. First of all, I am angry, frustrated, disillusioned, disappointed, just like every other person in this country right now. I took the time to step back from Parliament. Well, I was very specific in saying that I was not going to run in the January elections. I never said I was going to resign from politics, but I said I wouldn't run because I needed to step back and reflect. And reflecting meant looking at not only my how I produced over the last 4 years, but the structure itself, right? Parliament is flawed as a structure. Government is flawed as well, so we need to restructure our ministries. And so over the last 14 years, what we've been seeing is that everyone has kind of been on autopilot. And that is why when you hear these comments about, yeah, but you've been an MP, what legislation you bring? So first of all, Parliament needs a legal department, and when I stepped back, because I had to ask, why are we not as effective as we're supposed to be? Parliament needs a legal department. We need to update our rules of order there. So there's an evaluation that I took in my time to reflect on the last 4 years, and that was why I stepped back. When the fall of government came, I can say that it was about 24 hours before I was purchasing a ticket to move to the Netherlands with my family to pursue a PhD. I've always wanted to pursue my PhD and do research. I think St. Martin needs more researchers at the highest level, and that is exactly what I was going to do. And I got a call from Melissa, and I had one of my best friends there and my partner, and we were sitting down thinking about the state of this country. Because I was someone, I had 4 years in Parliament, I did what I could do, and I was actually happy to see this new coalition go into government. I kind of already knew and foresaw that this would have taken place because I knew that the people would have wanted to see an alternative to what they got over the last 4 years. Stable governance, that is something that they have paraded about stable government. So the people got 4 years, and I knew that the people would want to see something different. And so I was very happy, supportive, especially of PFP going into the new coalition. And when the government fall, that pain and that frustration and that anger that everyone had, I experienced it as well. And I said, I could not leave my country in this state without coming back to fight the good fight, because we are at war, Lady Grace. Honestly, that's how dramatic it is.
War.
Like, we're at war for this country. We are in a number of different crises.
You say war for this country?
Yeah.
Or for self?
No. But that's a good question. We are at war for this country, the state of this country. So right now we have an energy crisis.
Okay.
But we also have an infrastructure crisis. We don't have enough roads. When last was a new road built? We have cars. We don't have proper public transportation. Town is a wreck.
Yeah.
So we are in a constant crisis in this country. Education. We have a lot of our students that are doing very well,
Right.
but we have a big part of the population that is failing.
You always champion education, right?
And you know what? Honestly, we have not seen one innovation in education over the last 4 years. We haven't.
Despite asking for it repeatedly in Parliament.
Exactly. And as MPs, we can only, let's say, make amendments, but more importantly, we have to champion policy making, because at the end of the day, government is responsible to make policies that actually have an effect.
Right.
And that is another misconception that people have about MPs. You can create an amendment or pass an amendment, and then it takes about 6 years for that amendment to be executed. Sometimes they're not even executed
Right.
because of the gap between what is happening in Parliament and in government.
The constant change of governments.
But not
That
even,
too.
because
Not
we've
even,
seen
it's just-
amendments passed
Yes.
Right.
and that have not been executed because government is saying, oh, at policy level, we don't know how to get
And
this
we don't have
done.
the capacity.
We don't have the capacity to get it done.
And I'm glad you said that because we're still waiting for the plastic ban that
Yes.
was actually passed, I believe, and we
Exactly.
have not seen anything
But that
out
is-
of that.
and that is
The
a
ban
very-
on plastic
Yeah,
and
and that's
styrofoam
and that's
also.
a good example of how when people always say, or they try to I guess throw shade and say, well, what have you done in Parliament and
Mhm.
such? There's been no legislation. We've said it repeatedly.
Mhm.
There is such a thing as over legislation because if you don't have a way to execute and enforce said legislation, what was the point of passing it?
Mhm.
You went through the whole process of 2 years. I think that very often we want to see things done. And again, I'm 100% for a plastic ban. I'm 100% for animal protections and such. But there are entities that have to be set up to
Mhm.
execute that. And do we have the budget, first of all? Do we have the capacity? And I think people confuse capacity with bodies. It's not about bodies. It's about, do they have the capacity up here to do what needs to be done? You could have 10 people in a room and they're getting, they're producing the work of half
Mhm.
a person. And then you could have 5 people that have the competency, that have that level, and they can do the work of 15 people for you. And I think that's the disconnect that we see. People think the more persons you throw at a thing, it's going to solve it. But we can see that is not the case.
Right.
Another huge issue that we have in this country, and we've talked about it, lack of transparency. What is the truth? What is our current state of affairs? Because if we were transparent, we would have known, or the public would have known to prepare for this issue with GEBE.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of lying going on, and we're not transparent. And another issue is accountability, ladies. And this is why PFP is one of those parties. They have shown, especially in Parliament, we've seen motions of disapproval. The first time, I believe,
Yes.
a motion of disapproval came about. Minister, what you are doing is unethical. You're doing something unethical and you need to be held accountable for it, because too long in this country, people have just been allowed to get away with all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And then they get up and they talk about it as if it's nothing, when you need to go jail. We have a number of people that need to go jail, no, honestly. So where are we going and what are we leaving for our children? And enough is honestly enough. We have become capitalists. We need to stop selling out our country. We need to stop selling our votes, because we are in a state in so many different sectors.
Right.
And I think
right.
it's time that the people really realize that who they're voting for will make a very, very big difference in how this country is
And
run.
I listened to your previous guest, Grace, and she made the reference of politicians having characteristics of psychopaths. I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't go that far, but I can understand what she was trying to say, because historically our attention to politics has always been very tribal. It's always been very don't stop the carnival kind of conduct. But the thing is that if we continue to gravitate towards that as a voting population, what you're going to end up having is a lot of as they say, a lot of bread and circuses, but there's not going to be any functionality.
Right.
I always tell people, what is someone's plan? And I get it. People are tired of hearing, well, you need to have a plan, but that is just how it works. And I think it's easy to kind of go for the voice that sounds like it's matching yours, and to go for the song or the jingle or whatever that is nice to dance to or so. But ultimately, you have to look at what is the long-lasting impact of what this person or this party has offered me. What have they brought to me and then to the country as a whole? Because it cannot continue to be about the individual. And I know we talked about it all last term, leading up to when the curtain got cut. And there are suggestions I'm going to make to Voting Bureau as well, and to the Minister of Justice, for how this election is going to go. Because we see on election day the voter intimidation, the psychological warfare with the jingles being played at high volume all day long. But what was a carnival? Let's be real, it was a fete. It's not supposed to be that way. Voting is a very serious matter. Intimidating voters is not supposed to be something that happens in a civilized democracy. And I think that we have to start to gravitate more towards that, and to encourage people that, look, this short-term payoff that you're getting, this short-term solution, whether it's cash in hand, whether it's a bag of groceries, whether it's an air conditioned unit that somebody puts in your house, right now, the person that you that was there for 4 years might have put the air conditioning unit in your house, but guess what? The GEBE is off now. Is the air conditioning unit still working? You're calling to ask them to fix it, to replace it. Are they answering the phone? And that's what people have to look at. Who is offering you the long-term solution to make sure that the GEBE will be on so that your AC that you get can run?
To use a house
Okay, go ahead.
analogy, St. Martin right now is a house that is falling apart. Okay, the foundation is cracked, the walls are cracked, the roof is leaking, and we have been walking around looking at these things, and we haven't maintained them. We haven't called in an electrician, a mason, or nothing, and it's falling apart. And that's why we need competent persons, not only competent but decisive, because this energy crisis. We've talked about solutions for energy, ways to energy.
Right.
We don't have a national solar policy, but we don't have effective decision making. So not only do you have to vote for somebody who knows what they're talking about, that they're a professional, and you can look at their experience and say, hey, these people would know what to do in the situation, but when they come in, that they make decisions.
Right.
Because we've been very, very inactive and ineffective.
Right.
And now we can't continue like this. Everybody has been on autopilot.
We've had eight parties in the January elections. Now we're looking at 10?
Possibly, yeah.
About possibly we have 10 political parties running. How much does that affect the populace? Well, not the populace, but how much of an effect does that have on the other political parties? Because more and more parties mean basically scattered votes.
Yes.
So people are going to scatter all
It's
over the place because
definitely,
they're looking for an alternative.
It's definitely fragmentation of the vote, and I think that's why it's
Fragmentation,
It's
that's
so
the word,
important
right.
it's so important for people, like I said, to focus on the message and the messenger. Everybody can wave their hands and scream. Everyone can make videos and scream. Everyone can hurl insults. I mean, I've been members of debate teams and such. I can hurl insults with the best of them, but insults do not get the job done. Screaming from a stage or singing a song or whatever, it doesn't get the job done. At the end of the day, you have to put in that work, and sometimes that work means you have to understand the systems that you're working within. You have to understand that people need to be told the truth about situations. We see it now with GEBE. At the end of the day, Grace, I don't like to say I told you so, but I do feel very vindicated when I have to hear the interim manager of GEBE sit in a public session and say, well, the large developments have also brought stress on the grid. When I have to read the former CEO of GEBE, Mr. Civic, say on his social media that we have been saying that the large developments are straining the grid. Because
Is that true?
Yes,
Okay.
Of course. I think, look, I always talk a lot about how I'm a gamer. Duncan is also a gamer.
Right.
But Grace, anybody that ever played SimCity, okay, you know that if you build too much in this area and you don't upgrade and invest in infrastructure, the legs gonna go up.
Right.
If a video game could have taught me that at 9 years old, I don't think I need not even whether it's MBA or Nivaudry fear or a master's degree to tell me that something is going to go wrong if we keep on building without investing in the grid, investing in our infrastructure, and also hitting a pause on development.
But isn't it? But basically, even if, let's say, GEBE is not aware of a project that is going up, don't they have people that drive around and see a project and then, hey, let me look into that?
But you can
put a
imagine.
stop to it
You can imagine that's too late, no?
Yeah, it's definitely.
If the concrete done pour, it's a little
Right.
too late to have a discussion and say, hey, we can't actually sustain this.
So where are you pointing the finger here?
I think I'm pointing, well, I mean, the same finger I've been pointing this whole time at what was, at the person that called me crazy, I think on your show or on whoever's show, for asking that we pause development, which is the former minister of Rami. At the end of the day, I think that it's a little bit of vindication for us because this is something that we have been wanting and cautioning, just asking questions. It's not wrong to ask a simple question of, do you not believe that overdevelopment is going to strain the grid? A perfect example, I think, if I remember from back then, I think if you look at AUC, for example, AUC, I think, takes up 2 megawatts, 2 or 3. The towers, I think, is maybe 2. If I listen to the engineers in my life that have been trying to say, what are you guys doing? Whenever they come here and they're like, are you ever going to give the land a break? That's 2. And then count all the other big developments, the ones that are online, the ones that are not online. Count the fact that it's hotter now. People are burning their air conditioning units now. I think I have burned my AC longer now than I ever have since I had it. You understand? Because it's getting hotter. We are breaking records on a monthly basis. on a daily basis.
Right,
What
right.
is grace is ineffective public management.
Yeah.
Because government has such a responsibility to sustainably develop the country, to make decisions that affect the people. So that's ineffective. I mean, we're talking about ministries that have 20-something vacancies right now. So who's running the country?
Mhm.
We've never seen such bad public management yet. And honestly, that needs to change.
Yeah.
And I believe that the PFP is ready to do what needs to be done because of the competent professionals on the party.
You've been a strong ally, basically not ally, but supporter of the National Alliance. You ran on the slate of
Yes,
the National Alliance
I did.
for several elections. Your father actually ran
Yeah.
on the slate of the National Alliance and also became Minister of Justice, I believe, with the same political party.
Yeah.
Why? And then eventually you became an
went
independent,
I
you
did.
became an independent member in Parliament. And why now, when you look at that, you're saying, hey, listen, I didn't want to come back to politics, but if I come back, I'm not going to go back to the National Alliance. I'm going with the PFP.
So what you'll hear, Lady Grace, and you'll hear certain people say it. maybe
No, I
not
want to hear what
everyone.
you say.
This isn't a party that it used to be. National Alliance isn't a party that it used to be. Let's say if we look over the last 14 years, and the bones of the alliance is the SPA, and that is a party that my family has always supported. Okay, a party that was for social development, that was for education, a party that builds schools. This is not that party anymore. And I left because of a number of different things. For one, unethical decision making was huge. A lack of integrity with not everyone, but certain ministers was huge. And that was why I stood up first and I was honest about supporting a motion of disapproval. And then I went independent because I couldn't align with where I saw the party going with the values and so forth. A lack of transparency was also one, and that's just the truth.
After declaring yourself independent, did anyone from the party, the president of the party, the prime minister, then did anybody approach you and say, hey, hold up a minute here before you take this decision? We want you back here. Did they approach?
Well, definitely. I mean, the prime minister and I had a good relationship. No, have as well.
Have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No, there are no issues that the prime minister and I have. What I can say is that, and I was on this radio station as well, that I was very clear that first of all, I wasn't dropping government. I went independent and the coalition was intact, number one. And number two, that any decision that was good for the country, I would support. So party lines did not matter. I was not the enemy of the party. Any country, any decision that came about for the country that was good, I would support it. And that's why I was like, okay, well, Mila will support what is good for the country despite now being an independent member.
Are you surprised in any way that the former Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, ECYS, Dr. Rudolph Samuel, on Monday tendered his resignation from the National Alliance? And in a letter, he said that he was told that he would never become a minister again. And also that during the preparation for the last election, again, he said he would never become a minister again, regardless of the number of votes he received. How would you actually?
That's what he said. I didn't read the letter. So.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't a letter.
I definitely can't speak for the former minister as well.
But you said,
Yeah.
I know you can't speak
Yes.
on his behalf, but you said it's not the party that you actually.
It's not surprising, no. It's not the same party. It's not the same party of
So what are
14 years ago.
Right. So what do you think caused the changes within the party then?
Grace, that's a
Leadership,
good question.
leadership candidates. What exactly? Were they heading in a different direction that probably you didn't fit in with whatever new?
Well, I can say this, and I want to segue to the PFP. What is clear, and a lot of times I hear persons mention, you run on a party and it's what a party wants, even though you get into parliament, even though you're your own individual, it's not even about your conscience, it's about the party. What we are seeing is that parties are still not clearly defining what their philosophies are and clearly what they stand for. And that is the issue. Whereas with PFP, I could tell you already, science and technology are very key components of a reformed education system. But not necessarily that I don't know. And then I come in and then we kind of get different points of view depending on who's there. So that I can say is one of the biggest issues that I've seen. And I would hope that more parties take the time out to really define what their values are and what they stand on, because that is a huge problem in St. Martin. And then you get into government and you realize that this is not what was discussed prior to election.
Right, prior to joining basically the party. How much of an involvement does your parents, your family have in this decision making?
No, my family has always been a very huge part of not only my development, but also my political career, the support, the advice. My father has served this country. My mother has served as well. So they are my biggest advisors and also my biggest supporters. So my family, my partner, my daughter, my sister, my friends have always been there to have my back, and we have discussions about issues. Every day we talk about the issues of this country,
Right.
especially the state of education, the state of infrastructure. And so they're there with me and ready to kind of fight this good fight, like I said, because it's a battle. It's a battle for Simon.
Right. You basically aligned yourself with the PFP party when you became independent, right?
Well, some might say that.
Don't shy away from it. Don't shy away from
I think philosophically, and then this is again to and I hope you don't mind I tell it, but in the beginning of our term in 2020, former MP Peterson and I came with a motion to cut our salaries by 15%, all members of parliament and the ministers. We saw what COVID was going to be, we saw the damage it was going to do to the economy, and I said, there's also a certain dance that has to happen when you're dealing with geopolitics. And I knew that we would have to go to the Netherlands for liquidity support. So I said, let's take that initiative. And then you kind of set the tone by cutting your salary 15%. And you say, in solidarity with my country. Well, they had us to kill. I went to then MP Duncan and I said, I have this motion and I would like to know if you would be willing to support it and such. And we had an agreement, yes, okay. And then the Monday came for the meeting and I got a text from her and it was like, politics rules the day. I said, oh my gosh.
Oh boy.
And then later on, of course, afterwards, you get the story of what occurred. People were very against that, whether it was that we were opposition or that they didn't want to cut their salaries. And I think that for me was a turning point. That leads me to kind of agree with your previous guest on the psychopath point, because the lack of empathy to read such a motion that was meant to stand in solidarity with the country, us cutting our salaries, and to just vehemently go against it. And even persons told me, yeah, but if you do that, you're messing up MPs and ministers' loans and mortgages. And I said, the private sector, loans and mortgages. You're talking about our loans and mortgages? I said, if you guys have overspent yourselves, that's on you. But our country is going to go through a serious economic shift. Nevertheless, she ended up bringing a counter motion. And I think that that also had to be examined, because typical politics would have told me that I needed to then make her my enemy. But because I grew up around these people, because I know that the National Alliance is just SPA in a jacket, and I know the type of behavior and the mentality around tribal politics that they had, I knew that it was not her decision to do that. And I think, from then I was like, no, I recognize that this is somebody that is in a viper's nest. And I hope that, we can just have a political friendship. Later on, though, yeah, it kind of shocked me. I was there waiting. And they were like, MP. And she was like, with the motion of disapproval, I tried to, I was very impassioned. I was very passionate with that. And I was like, I urge my colleagues, just listen, like this cannot continue.
Right.
And I was waiting, and then I think that SG was like, Ludmila Duncan, and then she was like 4. I was like,
No, and I had spoken to the coalition. I was open and honest about
Yeah.
them, because it was about ethical decision making. And that's what I stood for, integrity as well. And so here we are today. What did I do? Here we are today. But it's about what's competent persons, not only, but people with integrity that want the best for this country. And that honestly, because power is something, and I heard the former the MP that was here before us talk about
This morning.
power is a sort of
a drug.
It's a drug, but it also eats away with you. And that is why I also stepped back, right? Because I realized you get in there. If more politicians step back to look at who they've become over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years, they're not doing what they said that they would. They're not getting anything done. In fact, they've changed. And also, we see levels of hypocrisy. 5 years ago you said A, and now you're saying B because it suits you. The country is not going anywhere. And honestly, if we don't start being truthful with the people and being transparent and being honest, then I don't know where we're going. And that's why we have all of these crises today.
Somebody needs to put a gag order on me. Tribal politics.
No, because I think
I meant that as a joke, though.
No, I know, but I have we've all heard it said. Like at the end of the day, there are certain political ideologies that will say, as long as you're in coalition, it's coming from opposition, it's a no, and we've never had that approach to governance and to politics. I think we kind of, in fact, people even accuse us of being too nice to the previous administration as a result of that approach. So I think that's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say, I look sometimes at candidates on parties and I think, wow, you've really landed incorrectly. And I think that motion to cut our salaries is when I remember saying very clearly to Rayon, I don't think Mila is where she needs to be, but everybody has to come to that realization on their own.
Right, I like that, because I like that you said that when you talk about salary cuts. Because yesterday I had an inspirational quote of the day that read, and it's a quote from the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It reads, and I quote, "We need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice.
Yeah,
not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity."
I also posted that. Posted that one. Yes, so that one was very popular yesterday.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
We're seeing more people on the road to mental health issues. And what we need are not necessarily legislation. We need facilities, bigger facilities for them. We need to make sure that we can access funds that allow these programs to expand, because more and more of our people are in poverty as well.
Yeah.
So we need a government that not only knows what they're doing, but really care for the people, as opposed to re-election.
And we talk about electoral reform all the time, but electoral reform basically empowers the people that are in government, so to speak.
I think
it benefits them.
To an extent. I think part of what we have always looked at as electoral reform is to try to trim away some of the distraction around our democratic process. We started with the curtain. Next, it might be that we become like the former British colonies, where you can't even be around the polling station on the day of election, simply to protect the sanctity of that act of voting.
Right.
That there's no music, there's no supporters, people waving flags. Last election, I was driving around and I saw people walking, like literally marching voters towards the booth from different parties, two in one air. Make sure you make the right choice. And I'm like, you're literally applying a pressure. You're stressing people out on a day that's not meant to be stressed.
Right.
That's not meant to be stressful at all. And I think that that those are the steps and the type of electoral reform that we need to also start to look at. And a large part of that is also going to be, like you said, a screening law. But to do that in such a way that we make it one clear set of parameters once and for all, it may require a change to the Constitution. And for that, you need a majority that is willing to do that.
Did the electorate in any way benefit from the removal of the curtain?
In some instances, yes, but in some instances, I think no. I think because the removal of the curtain kind of ramped up what was happening beforehand, and also the day of. I mentioned it in my objections to after the election with the meeting with Voting Bureau, where we requested a recount, and other parties also agreed that there was high levels of voter intimidation. There were high levels of suspicious behavior around polling stations. You had that awful fight in Belvedere with a lack of police presence. So I think those are the things that we also have to kind of look at, and it may change the dynamics of our, because I as a kid I used to have fun. You drive around, you wave your flag, you stand up at the polling station with a little placard and such. But it may be that has to change, and that's okay, because culture is nothing. It's not stagnant. It shifts, it evolves, and that also has to do with our political culture. So it can change.
Right. You mentioned also earlier about the noise, the music, and the parading that goes on in the different districts. But that you probably can't. You can't control that right now. But social media is an entirely different picture. It's painting an entirely different picture. I was mentioning this morning earlier in my program where you see now people are talking about getting really, really aggressive in such a way that actually I don't know how serious to take this when
Yes.
someone is talking about, oh, I can take this person out for the right price.
Yeah,
You know, where are we headed with elections here in
Exactly.
St. Martin? It is
Exactly.
getting very, very dangerous.
it is.
And I know for a fact that I've spoken to some people yesterday, and I said it myself, that this makes me scared.
Yes.
Because if we are getting to a point where people are actually talking about taking out people because they're running on a list and, you know, and what have you, then it's time for us to punch, you know, to basically mash the brakes, hit the pause
Yeah,
That
button.
is exactly
Hit the
what
pause
needs
button.
to happen.
Yeah.
Hit the
And
pause
we've been on
button.
autopilot.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
this is where it's brought us, and we have to stop, look, and make a decision to go in another direction.
But I
And
think
that will only happen
Right.
with persons who are clear about, first of all, not wanting the power for themselves,
Mhm.
but actually care about this country.
Yeah.
And not only for us here, but 10, 15 years from now, because we're so good at making decisions for now based on self. And then 15 years, where we are now, we realize, oh my God, the
It's-
country is in a mess.
Everything that is
What are
happening
we gonna
here
do?
is a culmination of the last 30, 40 years. That's the bottom line. It's not just the last 14, it is everything that was done even before we became a country within the kingdom that has led us
spiral,
here.
basically spiral out
Exactly.
of control.
Yes.
It's just been laissez-faire, and now here we are. and
Those
it
are the
needs to
seeds
change.
that were
Yeah.
planted.
Yep.
Yeah. When you look at elections over the years, and we're hearing some of the senior politicians are actually saying we have to change this because it was basically young people taking over the country,
Mhm.
but with no guidance. How do you respond to that?
I think
Lack of guidance, basically.
Well, that's a very good question. I had given a policy workshop a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about this with some nonprofit organizations. That what we see, and I'm somebody, I mentioned my parents earlier. I always go to advice. I always hear advice from the elders. I go
Mhm.
seek that out because they were there. They are experts. They were here before me. What my job is to bring innovation and to use their advice to go forward, right? We only know where we're going if we know where we came from.
Yeah.
And what we often see is that the knowledge sometimes isn't left back, or when it's given, it is not like codified and put into a manual, so to say. And that needs to happen. We have a number of persons that have retired from the government, but have gone with their knowledge because no one sat down with them and said, hey, you know what? Tell us about how this should be done, this process. What is this procedure? Have it there so that we could pass it on and we could train others. That's what needs to happen. And we see it often happening. And I get scared sometimes because I think about, oh my God, we have these elders that are up there in age, but we have not sat down with them and put what they know on paper, on video, and then share that knowledge. So that is something that I'm all for, because we do not know where we're going if we don't understand our history and then be innovative about how to move forward.
Right. A lot of parties, every party actually presents a manifesto, but do they really? I mean, a lot of people don't read. Okay, that's one reason I have to read the paper every morning for them. But the fact of the matter is that when you put out a manifesto, how many of the people actually, the electorate out there who actually take time to look at the manifesto and say, hey, and then call out the political party and say, hey, but you had this in your manifesto.
Yeah.
You hardly or never hear
We
that.
very rarely hear that. I mean, we did our best to kind of drill it down into even videos where we made
I
little
remember
videos
that,
about
right.
our manifesto and such. But I think too, it's also just involvement in politics has to be cultivated. You know, when we look at the other islands, when I talk to friends in Barbados and such from since young, primary school, it's something that's embedded in them, that is taught to them. There's deep politics within their own schools, student government, etc. So they're in it and they grow up with that, and so they're always invested, they're always interested, they're always reading, consuming some type of political knowledge. Whether it's in their classroom or so. But here we don't really have that.
Civic
That's
education. Civic
Okay,
education. And I
civics.
actually had passed a motion that included heritage. And this is me saying, hey, government minister, create a committee because we need heritage curriculum.
Yeah.
This identity issue, and we're talking about the fact that we've never seen, at least over the last few years, so much of our heritage, natural heritage destroyed. But now you're seeing the people saying, hey, listen, the calling of the police, the Simpson Bay Bridge, you see the Simpson Bay community coming together, persons making calls and saying, we are destroying our heritage.
Yes.
That means we're destroying who we are. And then I asked as well for civic education, in the curriculums, it is an update that needs to take place that has to happen in government.
Mhm.
It cannot happen from Parliament
Right.
because it's at the policy level. It's that government has to sit down with schools and say, listen, this is. So you teach our people how to be citizens, how to be effective citizens.
Yeah, and I think teachers also have a role to play in that. I mean, if I remember when I was in primary and in high school, you know, we had our social studies teacher who was from Guyana, and then we had our history teacher, which was Miss Van Enkelvoort. But both of them would have these discussions with us on things that were happening. They would look at the paper, they would read the paper, and then like you discuss with your readers or mention to your readers, they would also discuss with us, what do you guys think about it?
Right.
I remember, you know, discussing 1992, 93, the whole airport scandal was also brought up, you know, to us, and I was just a kid, you know, I was a baby. So basically, that also is part of making sure that your population is growing up and informed and educated and ready to just ask those types of tough questions. Well, why this? Why did that happen? I was also, you know, blessed to grow up in the environment that I did, but I do remember my classmates around me at those ages being more politically minded than majority of the young people that we see today. Most times people tune into politics when it's election time.
Right.
You understand? And then we kind of shut it off. But politics is something that impacts your life every day.
But I want to say that I am proud of, we have a St. Martin Youth Parliament, and I am proud of the work that they're doing. I'm also proud of Teen Times. Teen Times have been calling everybody out. They've been calling the government out. They have been calling Parliament out. And we have, especially PFP, myself as an independent member, over the last few years, acknowledged them and say, hey, listen, these are the youth telling us that they have an issue with this. They're asking us to improve education. They're asking us to do the things for heritage and culture that we need to do in order for this country to blossom.
Right.
And what we've seen, in my opinion, is that the government has ignored them, the former government.
Right.
And I know that is something that we will not be doing moving forward.
I think they're basically looking for ratings to see what they're actually rated. Because I think
and then calling to complain.
Right. But we talk so much about the youth, but are we really paying attention also to the environment? I mean, we spoke about plastic, banning of plastics and styrofoam, but you said it, Miss Duncan, that town is a mess. But not only town, but just look around the island,
the whole country. When I was in Parliament, I was chair of the Petitions Committee. I kind of campaigned on reminding the public that according to the Constitution, everyone has a right to submit a petition. And that petition isn't necessarily that you have to get signatures, just a letter. Parliament, this is an issue. We had the Nature Foundation and the environmentalists in to Parliament to discuss the development of Wallet Bay. The entire country is on a path to, I don't want to say destruction.
I was about to say, don't say destruction.
I won't say that. Right. What we've seen is unsustainable development. And a lot of it is government's fault, an old beach policy. We see a lack of a proper environmental and land development policy, which is being worked on now because the PFP understands what needs to be done. And it hurts me to see the environment as the way it is. What was funny is that Melissa likes to flashback me as well. In high school, in academy, for my SBA with two of my friends, Lavani being one of them, we did our SBA on the impact of the dump on the pond.
Okay.
And this was, 20-something years ago. And I talked about, and it was actually top in the region. We talked about how the pond is being affected by the dump and how if we continue like this is exactly what we're going to see. So it pains me that as a high school student, I did research on this, and in my mind, I couldn't imagine that we would continue without finding a solution to the dump and without focusing on the environment, because soon there's not going to be anything left.
It's a mountain.
Yeah.
It's not. It's basically a mountain now. Yeah. You know, and like you said, laws, but these laws are outdated, and how many of them have actually been addressed or changed, for that matter? I mean, as parliamentarians, you look at it, it can always be talked about. You know, it always can be brought up, but do we really see new laws being implemented, enforced, basically?
There's definitely a lot of legislative repair that has to happen. And something that former MP Peterson talked about a lot is that legislation is not as simple as sitting down to write a press release. It's very technical, it's very involved, and this is why in the majority of parliamentary democracies, and the Council of Advice will say this as well, legislation usually comes from government because they have the resources to be able to do the necessary technical checks that need to be done. You have, MPs that brag about whether it's 21 laws, 15 laws, 1,100 laws, or whatever. But how many have made it past the Council of Advice?
Mhm.
You understand?
Right.
That's also part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And so that is, and many of them, we have many laws pending in Parliament that were actually stuck because of a lack of research, because of a lack of information, whether from the government side or from other entities that the government can more easily engage with to find out, is this possible? And I think it again goes back to enforcement. You can there are, look, I'm a big nature lover, minus the wood slaves, but for me it's like you can pass all the laws and protections you want. Do we have the money to do the type of protections that need to be seen? Everybody watches Discovery Channel. You see, like Miami-Dade has a whole section of officers dedicated to animal protection. Literally, they go, they get gators, they get horses, they get dogs, cats, turtles, you name it. But do we have that force available to us? We have the money available to us to pay that.
But we do have nonprofit organizations
Yes.
working extremely hard in our community.
Behind the scenes,
Behind the scenes, with the environment, with youth poverty. We have local shelters and so forth. So we have nonprofits working extremely hard. And what government needs to do is create an environment to support them and allow them to do even more work. And we haven't been seeing that. And that's what we really need to do.
Yep.
Right.
And because government cannot do everything. However, you can support those organizations and facilitate and create an environment that they can also flourish.
We have always said that government has to be a facilitator. But what you see is that whether it's a cleanup project, a this project, or whatever, it becomes, a technology in the classroom project. It becomes something that I want to do myself because it looks good and because there's an election to be won. And until you get ministers that are not concerned about the vote, that's not going to change.
Right.
Lady Grace, we have hurricane season coming up. I am so
Glad you
happy
mentioned that.
who has been in the community after Irma. I was very active. I always talked about the development and the support of community councils and their work, the important work that they do. We have hurricane season coming up. And
It's already started.
The peak. Sorry, it's already started.
Yeah.
It's already started. And I am not sure the work that was done about maybe 5 years ago. I don't know where we are when it comes to the community
Shelters.
being involved in getting resources to people, water, food, all of those things. And these are things that we don't think about until we have an active hurricane season, then we're going to be scrambling.
Like I say, and the thing is that you can always reach out to your respective community council, but you also have certain areas where the community council is not really active, and that I think is where government can step in and kind of just mandate and say, you are the community council for Dutch Quarter. These are the parameters that we expect you to be able to meet and such. I myself, try to maintain contact with the community council from the region where I live. I know that they have a database of vulnerable persons in the event of a catastrophe and such, and I'm hoping to, meet with them to kind of update that and keep that fresh, because also after Irma, you saw that kind of chaotic, you don't know who's where and who needs help for what and whatever. And I think the more you can involve those councils from a fully mandated level, because you don't want 5 groups in one district to say either community council, and then you end up in a pissing contest basically with each other. And those are the steps that have to be taken as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will there be an official launch of the PFP for this upcoming election with your new candidate?
Not in the sense of a bacchanal. We've never been that type of party, but there will be an announcement, of course, and of course, there will be images that you'll see on social media.
Well, this is my first interview, actually.
Yes, exactly.
And I really appreciate the fact that you chose a breakfast lunch to make that
Thank
announcement.
you for having us.
Yeah, and I want to thank you both also, and your viewers also, for tuning in. The postulation day is coming up, and July 2nd, and the PFP, of course, will be coming out with a full slate.
Well, a slate
Plus one.
Yeah.
Not a full slate, the slate plus one.
Okay, maybe
from January. Okay.
There's a couple days to go.
All right.
Yes,
okay.
but it will be July 2nd. We managed to get our preferred time slot of 9 a.m. to hand in the list. So also, inviting persons to come. I think we had one of the more lively,
the brass band.
Yeah, the brass band with our own Luciano Nichols, on drums. So definitely inviting persons who want to show their support to come out and meet with us 8:45 by the government, but old government building parking lot,
Right.
and we're gonna walk the list into Parliament.
All
as
right.
always.
All right. In closing, anything you'd like to say to the radio listeners this morning? Let's give it to the newcomers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Lady Guys. Thank you to everyone. I've gotten a lot of positive reactions and positive views to me returning. I tried to explain that I needed to step back, analyze, and reflect on my tenure, but also what needs to change in government. I am here because we're in a state of emergency, and I'm here to fight for the people. And I look forward to joining the PFP officially on July 2nd of postulation, and being a part of the progress that needs to happen in this country.
All right.
Yeah.
And MP?
Not just welcome at long last to my fellow Jedi, my fellow Virgo, Ludmila Duncan. I'm looking forward to seeing the dynamic changes that can come as well with having her here, and also to know that we're gaining a wealth of knowledge as well in her dad. Because I always like to have that kind of that knowledge, because sometimes some things will happen, and then my dad would say, well, you remember in 1994. But it's good to remember that, and to use that as kind of your, maybe we could have done it differently in the 22 years since then.
Right.
But definitely to tell the people that, I understand it's frustrating. I know one of the biggest things I've heard since the snap election was announced is that persons they do not want to vote. So we're back to the same discussion of you have to vote. Like, it is your civic duty. People are still worldwide fighting for this right, dying for this right. This is something that we have that is given to us. So you must exercise it, and to look at the content of people's hearts. At the end of the day, you have persons that gave a government 17 days before they decided to drop it, whereas yours was kept together for 4 years, and I can't count the number of calls I had to drop that one. And I think that is what needs to be said. You cannot say one thing outside of your mouth about stability, and then on the other side of your mouth actively work to actually upset stability.
Right.
So to look at person's hearts, look at the content of their character, and make that right decision on August 19th and choose progress.
All right. Looking forward to having you all back here again on the Breakfast Lounge. Once again, thanks to both of you for sitting in here with me this morning, and also to MP Shamina Roseberg, who's currently in Parliament, I believe,
Yes,
because
I'm on my way there now.
have to go to a meeting. Okay. All right. To you once again, Miss Ludmila Duncan, a new candidate of the PFP Party State, and MP Melissa Gumbs for joining me here in the Breakfast Lounge. And to you, I give you back your 7 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
See, I told you I was going to give it back to you.
Yes, it is.
All right. And thanks to you, the radio listeners, also for